I wanted to talk about tonight is it had to do with a teaching that Larry brought up a couple weeks ago, and he was taught we were going through the crucifixion, but trying to read it with new eyes. And so in that, the idea of the darkness came up, and I couldn't let go of that. I was like, yeah, that's actually really intriguing, Lord. I'm really intrigued by that, and I can't seem to let it go. So I kept asking him all week, like, what is that? Because I've always brushed it off as it's been explained to me. It was an eclipse. It was, supernatural. But it's almost like even the idea of it being supernatural in an eclipse was just said to me so many times that it lost its edge. And even that, I'm like, well, wait, no, there's more to it. If it is supernatural, what really was that? Because everything you do is so intentional. And it started to just bring kind of chills to me, thinking like, every single one of the Gospels talks about it. And there's actually a lot of other ancient texts that talks about it too. At first I thought, well, maybe it was their way of saying it was the darkness within their soul, this extreme heaviness. No, there's a lot of other manuscripts that talk about that darkness that settled over the earth in that time. And they refer to the earth. Now, I don't know if that, sometimes the earth at that time was just, what they knew around them. But it was very interesting because it was a significant darkness that multiple people mentioned. So I was like, all right, Lord, we'll just see where that, where that goes. And he reminded me of a while back, I was with a friend, and there was this magazine that we came across that had this black hole a picture of it on the front. And my friend looked at that, and her reaction to it was, oh man, I hate those things. They're so evil. They, and my response, I just kind of looked at her and I was like, really? They're evil? So, well, yeah, they're dark, they're black. There's nothing good about that. And I didn't really say anything back. And then, so a while later, later on that day, I presented that question to the Lord. I felt some shame come up because I've always found black holes very fascinating. And so I felt a lot of shame that, well, should I not have an interest in this? Is there something wrong with that, Lord? Like, is it really evil? And the first thing that he said to me was actually so fascinating, and it changed my mindset quite a bit after that. But he goes, of all the things that you know of in the universe, the black hole is the thing that has the most voracious appetite for light. And I thought, oh, wow. As far as I know, in the universe that we know right now and how things operate, a black hole is the place that has the most light in it. And yet it is perceived, the way it's perceived. But if you were to look right over the horizon, it's like, well, wow, like, what are you saying with that, Lord? Like, what is the potential in that? And I'll come back to that a little bit later because I think there's a heck of a lot more potential in that. But the idea is it's not what it seems. And so darkness, I don't think, is what it seems. So then I went into, defining darkness. It's a lot more than just the absence of light, but that's key. It is the absence of light. It is the absence of something. It is not a thing in itself. It is not powerful in itself. It's just the absence. So physically, darkness is a lack of illumination, a space where vision is obscured. And biblically, darkness has often been understood as representing sin, judgment, and separation from God. But when we read things with that lens, sometimes we miss some other hidden things in there. And that's a lens that I've always typically read darkness with. I think there's a lot more to it, though. So then I actually started looking into what ancient Hebrews thought of when they talked about darkness. And there's probably people here that know more about this than I do, but just a brief little thing is I was actually coming across, and I had this suspicion about this, but they didn't really view it as merely a negative thing. It actually, they thought of it as a space of mystery, divine presence, and transformation. And that's really different. They did also refer to it as it symbolized judgment. But you have to understand that their idea of judgment is a little bit different than ours. Our penal system is about bringing punishment. Their judgment is about restoration. And so when you think about the darkness, and even in its aspect of symbolizing judgment, think of like more restoration. What is the Lord redeeming in that? What is he bringing back into proper alignment? What needs to be revealed? And so like they also talked about God's hidden glory in the process of revelation and darkness. So the idea of darkness having these more sinister, negative things actually came in through the medieval era. That's when it started getting associated with sin and demonic forces. But prior to that, I wasn't necessarily finding that so much. So I found that very interesting and just trying to, like, that's something I would like to challenge myself going forward. Like, you know, when we read like the crucifixion story, things like that, those lenses that we automatically have, and trying to identify what those are and trying to, oh, wait a second, that's how I usually see this. But what if I saw it this way, through that lens? What would this say differently? And so that's just something to think about. I'm not necessarily saying that darkness in the Bible is never saying something very negative. But for me personally, I think there's a lot more to it. So like one truth to remember here is darkness isn't necessarily the enemy. It is the mystery waiting to be revealed. So then I started going into some verses just to see, like, all right, what do you have to say about this, Lord? Like, where is it that, you know, this Hebrew idea of it, like, I want to see some confirmation in this. The first thing that came to mind was the darkness in Genesis 1. So Genesis 1:2 says, "Now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." So I thought this was so fascinating. I actually I didn't get this until like a little bit later, going over my notes again, but I was like, wait a second. God was actually, it's saying that God's presence was already moving in the darkness before the light. We always talk about him as being the light. He was there before the light. And I got that the first time, but there's something a little deeper about that. It's like, no, the darkness in him, there's a link there that he puts right in the very beginning. He was shaping the world, moving in the darkness before the light was ever formed. Now he is light, but there's something, there's something in that. So then Isaiah 45:7, "I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do these things." That once again confirms God rules over the darkness. It's not outside of his control. It's not something to be scared. He rules it. He created it. And one thing I know is he doesn't create evil things. He doesn't create bad things. It doesn't mean he controls, but yeah, the darkness in itself is not a bad thing. In Psalms 18:11, God veils himself in darkness. He hides his presence to display his glory in time. There's a gentleness in that where he knows there's a timing for things, and sometimes he uses the darkness to hide some things until it's proper time. One thing that can bring a lot of comfort to us is when we face uncertainty, we can trust that God is working behind the scenes, preparing something new. And this is a concept that we've often heard, but it really makes sense when you see him in the darkness, when you see him as that. There's an aspect of that is him. So darkness is not a mistake. It's part of his creative process to bring revelation. Exodus 20:21, I've always found this passage very fascinating. "The people stood afar off, and Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was." It's like after receiving the 10 Commandments, the Israelites were too afraid to approach God's presence. And they remained in that place for a long, long time until Jesus came to reveal to them, you do not need to be afraid of the Father's presence. But they were afraid of his presence, the thunder, the darkness, the lightning, and they asked Moses to be the representative for them. But he was calling them into that. That was an opportunity. Moses, however, stepped into the unknown, into the place where God was, in the darkness. This moment illustrates that faith often requires stepping into mystery to encounter God more deeply. God is present in the depths of uncertainty, calling us to draw near rather than retreat. But he's so gentle. He's not going to, he continued to give the Israelites opportunities. He continues to give us opportunities. He knows that we do have a tendency to retreat. We're afraid of what we don't know. But he's always there in the unknown. He's always there. And there's a gift in the darkness. Psalms 127:2 says, he gives his beloved sleep. And I love how nature mimics just deep biblical truths. So the night is darkness, and it's designed for restoration. And just as sleep replenishes the body, spiritual darkness or waiting seasons are there for renewal, they're for restoration. They play a key part in it. And seeds, like that's another example. Seeds need the dark soil. They sprout in the dark soil before they come into the light. A lot of things happens in those dark places. And in seasons of struggle, spiritual roots grow deep, strengthening our faith. And I'm just reminded of what Vicki was saying, like that word. It's like, yeah, it actually was a really beautiful season, but they're not easy seasons, and it's hard. We get really impatient. We like the light seasons, but there's a lot of beauty in those nighttime seasons. This one was interesting. As I'm going through this kind of stuff, I wouldn't have put it in these terms. So the Lord specifically used this term, and then it was like, aha, like it kind of came back later. But he mentioned, yes, just like children, babies, there is darkness in the womb before the tearing of the veil. I would never have used that phrase, but I'm like, well, that's a little bit like harsh. He goes, well, where have you heard that before? It's like, oh. And so this kind of brings me into the darkness at Jesus' crucifixion. So Matthew 27:45. From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. So there's just a few notes that I kind of made through this, and these are not to say that this is exactly what it is, but I started seeing that darkness multifaceted and just a lot of different things in it, and I'd be curious to know what you guys think. So there's the idea it's a supernatural event. This was not a natural eclipse because Passover occurs during a full moon. And so scientifically, that can't happen. And then as Larry very intriguingly pointed out, he goes, and no eclipse lasts that long. That means it's something far bigger than the sun. And I'm like, oh, yeah, like that's kind of crazy. So there is something far bigger than the sun going on here. It's not a natural eclipse. This is a supernatural event. This is creation responding. There is an aspect of judgment over sin, but remember, judgment is restoration. And sin is these lies, is falling away from who we really are. So you kind of have to take that statement in a slightly different way. But so darkness symbolizes God's displeasure towards sin. It's not us, just towards these things that steal life from us, these lies that steal from our real identity. He displeases in that because he so wants us to be free from that. It's his love that, speaking through that. So there's an aspect where, yes, this darkness could represent that judgment over the sin. And it kind of reflected in Amos 8:9. I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in broad daylight. I found that very intriguing because I was like, as he was doing this, he's kind of speaking to the Israelites in reference to, remember, I said I would do these things. But he's not just doing it out of this place of penal punishment. And yet, nature's responding to this, and he's doing things that are triggering stuff to them that I'm sure many of them recalled that verse, and they're like, oh, well, wait a second, there is something in this. And then this was interesting. I thought, there's an aspect of creation literally mourning its creator. Creation literally manifesting this darkness from what's happening. And not from a place of defeat, but it can't help but respond. It's its creator and what is happening at that current moment and the mysteries of it. Creation can't help but respond to that. And it's mimicking even the darkness from which all creation started from. So I just find that very interesting that darkness comes back in at that particular time. And then God's presence is veiled. Not at all from a place of separation from God, but Jesus was bearing the weight of the sin. It's crying, my God, why have you forsaken me? And what I really enjoyed was Larry talking about there being a possibility that perhaps the Father actually was fully feeling and embracing, and in that moment, wow, this is what my children are really experiencing. They really think they are separate from me. And so God's presence being veiled in that as he's experiencing the depth of what we feel, and he's feeling in his empathy with us. But then you have the veil being torn. And just him showing, and then the darkness suddenly splitting, the veil being torn, the darkness lifting. As Jesus cries out, it is done, it is finished. But so this was interesting, because I was asking the Lord, so why use the phrase, the darkness in the womb until the veil is torn? And he said, well, because there was a birth that was happening at that time as well. And so I asked, what was being birthed at the crucifixion? And I can't say that this, I believe what he spoke to me is he said, my bride was birthed at that time. And I suddenly realized there's a lot of imagery in that all happened where there's a lot of things that do symbolize a birth. You have, the veil being torn, which I would not have seen that before. But I really do feel like he was telling me, no, there's an aspect of this and that. And I've heard at teachings before that when he was jabbed in the side and the water and the blood came out of his side, that is what happens during birth. There was a reason he specifically said water and blood came out of my side and his side. I'm like, with Adam and Eve, Eve came out of his side. I'm like, there's a whole reworking of just a mirror image of things that he's bringing back. And he's saying, in that moment, there was a birth. It was my bride, came out of my side. And this darkness is it's not a bad thing. It's not all, this horrible mourning over, wow, they missed it, they failed, really, you did this. I think it was almost this mystery just coming out. And creation can't even help but even respond to that. So I don't know. These are just they are not teachings as this is what it is. But there is an aspect of learning to redefine darkness. Yeah, go ahead, Monique.
Well, there's a slight, I've been battling over there, because there's a slight selfishness that I wanted to be the first one to take the mic in your teaching and ask you a question. But before I do that, I'd like to bless the mic while you're teaching. That the Lord would bless the questions that would always have answers that would flow when you needed them, and that the Lord would bless the people that come up with a knowledge of what to say, and that the Lord would shut the mouth of those that don't need to say anything. But then I was looking, when you said you didn't see the connections, like the darkness and the hibernation, but don't you hibernate in the darkness? And isn't that part of like maybe a cocoon? And this whole concept of rebirth. And I kept asking for, may I come up now? And then you would make the point that he was saying, and then I would sit. And then I would say, may I come up now? And he's like, okay, you can come now. But I basically just wanted to bless that. And it's amazing to me to see the interweaving of what everybody is saying, and that it actually is in what you're saying.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is, huh? That is pretty cool.
Okay. This is a scripture in Isaiah 43:3. It says, I will give you the treasures of darkness and the riches hidden. Well, it's giving me all these different translations now. But what it spoke to me was about the riches that in heaven that he has for us, the darkness. And it changed my whole thinking about dark. Like that's a really good teaching. And wow, that's what, like, eye-opening when you see that the darkness doesn't have to be the devil. I mean, because he can give you treasures in it. So I just wanted to share that.
That's an awesome verse to bring up. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, to look into some of these verses more, because I think there's just so much that I've overlooked, and just having darkness mean only one certain thing. And then anytime there was a contradiction too, it was almost like it just kind of would glaze over. I don't know. Yeah, so then one other point about darkness here is that darkness is a temporary state. Revelations 22:5, there will be no more night, for the Lord God will give them light. And that's not because darkness is a bad thing that needs to be expelled. It's because when you get to a place where all has been revealed, where all has come into alignment, that nothing needs to remain hidden, veiled. It has its proper time to come forth. So while darkness is often linked to judgment, it does not last forever. But even in that aspect, that would be a judgment that I think people oftentimes fear. And if you think of judgment as a restoration, it's like, it's okay, Lord, make it last as long as you need it to, because you will restore and redeem every last little thing. Have your way with it all. So Jesus is the light of the world, John 8:12, dispelling spiritual darkness for all those who believe. That's bringing that revelation, bringing just that light to everything in which there's a misalignment, or things, mysteries and treasures that haven't been revealed yet. Darkness may precede revelation, but in Christ, light always wins. So just kind of in conclusion, darkness is not evil or even a thing in itself. It's more of, if there is any negativity in it, it's just simply that it is the lack of something. It's a lack of understanding of some aspect of him or some aspect of who we are. That is all that could potentially be negative in it. It is not, it's an opportunity for God's glory to be unveiled. And if we can think of it that way, we won't be afraid of anything. So going back to that black hole, I found that interesting, because then I was kind of reflecting back on that another time. And I thought, so if this black hole is taking in all this light, well, what's it going to do with that? Like, what happens in that? Yeah, exactly. It can't just simply disappear. Light does not disappear. Energy does not disappear, and it will never stay hidden forever. So I do believe that it creates. So there's a mystery in that will be revealed in time. And so that's just so amazing. That, a perfect example of God in nature reflecting spiritual truths. Something that could be seen as so intimidating, so evil, just consuming and destroying, is actually has this voracious appetite for light, like we all should, and it's storing it up, I think, because of a creating aspect of what it does in that. And Einstein actually had some interesting stuff about that. They haven't figured it out yet, but
when you were speaking, I just have this vision in me, this blob of darkness consuming all the light, and then as it consumes more and more, light is compressing it, and it's creating a world, a new world. That's where all the light is going. It's like creating a baby.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So yeah, just like, as we read through things, even just like, how might these old ideas of darkness taint how we interpret Scripture or how we see ourselves as God's children? Like, it does. It taints it in a whole different picture. So then think about what would change if we didn't see darkness as this powerful enemy, but merely an opportunity to walk into mystery and be a part of the unveiling. How does that change different scriptures that we read, or different ways that we see different people, or different threatening situations? And another thing I just want to leave you guys with, how does that change spiritual warfare? So, yeah. That's pretty much what I have in that.
I loved it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And also, I love some of the stuff. Somewhere in the first 10 minutes, I've had the Florence and the Machine song in my head. It's always darkest before the dawn, which is a human cliche, yeah? But it's a human cliche for a reason. And I love how you pointed out, like, the darkness. We're like, oh my God, the dawn is the thing. But, like, no, the darkness actually kind of heralds the dawn.
Yeah.
It's a sign that something is happening. Stuff happens in the dark, but dark is always followed by the light, always.
Yeah.
So, awesome sauce.
Absolutely.
Can you expound on what you think, how that changes spiritual warfare?
Yeah. I'm going to share a story with you guys. This was an experience that I had with the Lord when I started shifting my mindset in that and thinking, well, wait a second, some of these things that you're saying, Lord, well, I can't draw the line here. Like, where do I draw the line? Where do I draw the line with how redemptive your love is? With loving my enemy, different things like that. And so I asked him, I said, and I was pretty fearful. I didn't really know what was going to happen, but I was in a place where things were shifting. Things didn't make sense anymore, the way that I had done things. And I was actually on a spiritual warfare team at the time. And so I was starting to feel like, I don't think I can keep doing it the way that I have been doing it. Something doesn't seem right about this. So in my own time with him, I didn't want to undermine my teacher, and even the way that the group did things, because I understand, everyone has their own revelation. But this was a revelation he gave me, and I really wanted to see what he meant, and it actually gave him the chance to correct me if I was potentially stepping into something I shouldn't. So I asked him, am I allowed to use love in spiritual warfare? Like, you say love is far more powerful. Like, why would I go at my other enemies with love, but then go at these beings, these things that I'm labeling as this, and go at them with hatred? I said, actually, what I'm actually doing very much so mimics hatred. I would not do that to a human being and call that love. And so I thought, okay, well, actually, what he said to me, because I was scared. I thought, man, am I going to go to hell even like entertaining some of these ideas? Like, I was pretty new in that direction, and so I had a lot of fear with some stuff that I was trying to rework in my mind. Well, so he said to me very assuringly, he goes, what is the worst that could happen if you go into a spiritual warfare situation and you start throwing love at it? I thought, well, I guess the worst is they'll just run away. I said, well, wouldn't that be the point? Then that's what you're trying to do right now, just have them run away. But what if they didn't run away? And I thought, that would be interesting. Like, what would happen? I don't know, but they probably will just run away. So in that case, all right, well, it should be safe to try it. So there was a season many years prior where I had a situation happen. To make it short, I woke up in the middle of the night, and it was a typical, I believed it was a demonic entity there. And I felt the Father's presence there, and I said, well, what the heck is that even doing? Like, I don't want to engage with that. What is that even doing there? It doesn't have any right to be there, right? And then I felt this really intense light come out of my chest, and I felt like I exploded, and there was a visible light in the room. And I could not figure out what the heck happened. But all he said to me, and then he gave me an immense amount of peace, and I fell back asleep, which is really odd to have happen after that. But he said that something really big happened, but you will know in time. Right now, don't worry about it. So in that moment, I'm asking him, well, is this okay? He goes, go ahead and give it a try. So I'm like, well, I'm just here in the room right now. Suddenly, I found myself back in that very same moment, in that same time. Like, I don't, that's the best way I can describe it. I really do believe I was in that same time again. And so I was experiencing as it was happening right then and there. And I saw what that light was. What I did with that being is I thought, well, okay, if I'm supposed to love you, for one, like, what's your name? Like, that's kind of how I relate to something in a situation like that. It wouldn't give me its name, so I turned to the Father. I said, well, what is its name? And he said, its name is isolation. Immediately I realized that's not its identity. That's what it believes it is. Its real name is community. And so I was like, oh wow. And I suddenly saw it for what it really was. I saw that being in community in the heavens with the Father. But it had forgotten that. It didn't know it. It didn't even think it could do that anymore. And so then I started saying, I forgive you. I forgive you for the isolation you've tried to bring into my life. I forgive you for, I realized it had assignments with that, and that's why it was there. But I could also see that there was a lot of confusion in it. When I started being able to engage with it that way, there was this confusion and this sadness over it, like it had lost an assignment, but it didn't know what it was supposed to do, so it was just kind of there, confused. And it didn't really know what to do when I started saying, I forgive you. I remember it saying, you can't do that. And I thought, well, can I do this, Father? And he was just looking at me, smiling the whole time assuringly. So I said, okay, well, I do. I forgive you because the Father already forgives you. He's already forgiven you from the very beginning. It's okay. You just don't know what you are. You don't know what you forget. You forget who you are. And as I was doing this, that's when I felt love manifest as the light, and I actually saw it come out of my chest, and I saw it envelop that being, and I saw that being like it had a chance to run. It could have run. It could have, you know, I'm not, and you don't hurt it with love. It has the opportunity to run, but it stood there because it was ready. Like it actually, like it was, you could see doubt. Like really, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to forgive me. You're forgiven. Well, but you guys have always said that we can't be forgiven. And I realized that there are certain things that we say in spiritual warfare that I had to ask for forgiveness of. Where I'm like, I don't have a right to label and say these things as something's identity. Maybe they're just simply lost in the dark the way that I have been over different aspects of my own identity. And so rather in spiritual warfare, come at things with calling out its true identity. And if it's going to run, well, all right. Well, then they left you alone one way or another. If it's what actually happened to that thing is, and I call it a thing because I can't call it, I don't know what it is. Some people would say, well, it obviously wasn't a demon then because that can't happen. I don't know what it is. All I know is the first time I encountered it, I thought it was a demon. Next time, I'm just like, you're a being that's created by the Lord. That's all I know. And he doesn't create bad things. But that thing, that when that light hit it and it didn't run from it, it stood in it. The darkness lifted from it. It didn't have this dark, hazy identity that was hard to even tell its face. It became like an angelic-looking creature with ribbons of all different colors hanging from it and just started swirling and dancing. And I've seen it many times since, and it scared me because I'm like, this thing is still following me. I'm still confused, Lord. Like, what did I just invite? And he goes, it's okay. You gave it a space. Because I felt like the Lord wanted, like, all right, you forgave it. Now give it a space. Like, okay, your assignment was something negative with me. So I want to encourage you, bring what you are and be community with me. And things did change for me after that. And it was, and that being that friend, it was very much so a part of it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Now I understand the passage that I'm about to read. When he had come to the other side of the country, to the Gergesenes, there met him 2 demon-possessed men coming out of the tombs, exceedingly fierce, so that no one could pass that way. And suddenly they cried out, what have we to do with you, Jesus, Son of God? Have you come to torment us before the time? Now a good way off from them was a herd of many swine feeding. So the demons begged him, saying, if you cast us out, permit us to go away into the herd of swine. And he said to them, go. I get it.
Years ago, I did a prophetic art piece that has a purple mountain, because America is the purple mountain majesty, right? Mm-hmm. And there were storm clouds all around it, but coming out of the storm clouds was the American flag waving. And God said, when darkness covers America, the glory of God will be released, because the storm clouds always come before the glory of God.
Wow.
And so I had that, but the other thing, I've always said, and God just reminded me of this in the last month when he was doing all the reaffirming and confirming, and that is, I've always asked him, God, I'd rather be served as fine wine instead of grape juice. And that's saying yes to the dark.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty awesome.
Just as a word of encouragement to you, I don't know if you've heard of a mystic by the name of Ian Clayton.
Yeah.
He talks about an encounter with the dark cloud in the heavenly realms, And it's a purifying type of thing so that he can go deeper with where God wants to take him.
Yeah.
So that's really cool about darkness. And Mike Parsons, a mystic in England, talks about redeeming evil spirits because they're just confused identity as well.
Yes.
So you're not alone.
I didn't know about either, them saying those things before. I found that after, and it was a lot of comfort. 'Cause but yeah, before, because I came across Mike Parsons stuff, and I was like, oh, all right. I didn't just make it up in my head, Lord. Thank you.
So, just real quick, a couple of things. One is today I was listening to George MacDonald, and there was this sentence in the book that said, if we only understood our capacity to love, the power and authority that we have just by loving, I'm paraphrasing, he said it way better than I am, the things we could do. And so I do think that we as believers have to come to terms with the fact that we are full of the love of God, and to let that actually be expressed out of us in circumstances. The other thing is years and years ago, we used to pray with a bunch of pastors, and I got a word for this particular pastor in Colorado Springs. And it was, I just saw this darkness, like no absence of light, darkness. And the Lord said, hey, tell him that out of darkness, he's going to be creating. I don't, my relationship with this guy is not like tight or anything, but I was like, okay. And I went through, okay, God, what scriptures? And the only one I could come up with was Genesis, out of the darkness, let there be light, But so anyway, I gave him that word, and he looked at me like, oh my God, darkness? I'm going to create out of darkness? And I realized right there and then that he rejected that word. And that was fine, but as the years went by, I started realizing how much God does through our darkness in a creative way. So it is well with my soul, right? Came out of that guy's gotta be just a place of darkness, and if you start looking at people and their creativity that's come out and their strategies and all these things, they've come out of dark places in themselves. Anyway, so that's one, two. And then the third one is, I believe that, what is the third one? Yes. Okay. So when that 3-hour darkness came, my thought when you were talking was, oh my gosh, Lord, did you set the earth, all of the earth in darkness, enveloped it in darkness, to redeem creation by recreating those roots and seeds and all the things that you put in the earth at creation? Was that the moment where you went and redeemed that in the same way that Jesus was redeeming us? In other words, we always say, oh, he redeemed the cosmos. But when did he redeem nature? When did he redeem creation? When did he redeem humanity? When did he redeem the skies, And so anyway, I just saw this big blanket going over the earth, and I'm like going, oh my gosh, what if that's what that was? Now, okay, for those of you in the internet world, I'm not saying that's what it was, because, I don't want any of your grief, but what an amazing thing that would have been. And so now I've got this question in the back of my head that when I get to, get with the Lord and say, Lord, what about that? Were you actually in that darkness? Because I do believe it's more supernatural than it was like an eclipse. So anyway, there's.
I love that. Yeah. I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, and I love that. That's what we're doing right now for anyone that, in the future that could twist these words. It's just mystery. We get to explore with the Lord mysteries. He has so many mysteries and treasures. And he loves when we just like, was it this? Was it that? What are you saying, Lord? Go ahead, Terry.
That reminded me of a book that I read years ago, and it's Dear God, this is Anna, or Dear God, it's Anna, something like that. And it's this little girl, and what I would say now, I didn't have the vocabulary back then, is these are encounters with the Lord. She just saw things differently. And somebody asked her one time, what color is God? And she said black. And they're like, what do you mean God is black? And she goes, black is what you get when you put all the colors together.
Exactly. Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Terry, that was awesome. I forgot. White is actually the absence of colors, and black is the presence of all the colors. So good. I wanted to come back to your spiritual warfare thing. I think it was Tracy Irvin was the first person I heard say, I was taught kind of, demonic stuff. It's like, okay, I rebuke you, I bind you, I curse you, I send you away. And Tracy was the first person I heard say, I bind you, I silence you, and I send you back to Jesus. And I was like, oh, I like that. But I didn't like it from a place of love. I liked it from a neener. But as I'm growing, and as you're saying this, and especially, my heart is moved for the entity of isolation that you were encountering. Like, it made me start thinking of, okay, so if a third of heaven goes away, how many of them 10 seconds after that went, oh, shoot, that was a mistake. But now they're mired in bleh.
Exactly. They believe the same lie we believe.
Right. And so
you can be so bad that he won't forgive you.
And as sons of God, like how powerful it is to do what you did and say, I forgive you. And I call who you actually are, who you were created to be, because you were not created to be isolation. This is so yummy.
I like too what Tracy said. I send you back to Jesus. So even if she didn't do it for a particular reason, well, that refers that, well, you came from him. I'm sending you back to him. Now let him do what he's going to do with you with his love. Yeah. Go ahead, Tommy.
Okay. A little thought. In the light, when everything is going well, you things become commonplace, and you almost look at a flower and, oh, you've seen that flower before. You lose the awe of God. And so when darkness comes, when we've just gone through all this interesting time, and you begin to relish the light. You relish the awe and the miracles of God that kind of come as a lady just drops off a meal and you needed it, but you didn't tell anybody, or a pastor comes and prays for your husband's knee, and all of a sudden he doesn't have any more pain the next day. And, because it was the darkness, it was the hard time that allowed the glory of God and the awe of God to be birthed again for me in some of these times. And so as you're looking for the awe during the dark times, and you purpose to do that, it really brings a different perspective in just the simplest little things that you think, wow, God, you came through here, and the different facets of his glory, that come through. And you don't think about that when things are going just peachy keen. You lose the awe and the wonder of the childlikeness of going, wow, I wonder what he's going to do now. wow, how is that going to look? You know, when you were talking, I thought about um, the other night, I got up and the room was really dark, and I'm going, man, I can't see. I know there's got to be a light switch somewhere here. I can't, you know, going because I was half awake, half asleep. Anyway, and then as my eyes began to focus a little bit more, because I intended to say, okay, just stop. You know what you're doing. And you lived in this house, but it had become familiar. And in my stupor of getting up in the middle of the night, I had to stop and think, oh, focus, eyes. And so I intended, the intention was to see in the darkness. You see what I mean? And so if I just gotten up and I had a motion sensor and the light came on, and I would have gone, oh, okay, I know what I'm doing. But because it was dark, I had to intend to see and remember, oh, I remember where things are. I remember, you know, and it's kind of like that great big thing, like when you're in the darkness of going through a hard time, you remember, you purpose to remember who he is. You purpose to remember who you are. You purpose. And then as you're purposing, you begin to see, and you see different aspects than you would if everything was going just fine. So I think that you're totally right. There's such beauty in the darkness. There's such an opening up of the bud of the rose in the darkness, you know, things that you're not looking for in the day because everything's light, you know. So anyway, it was kind of the aspect that I have come through since the last month of having an interesting time. And the Lord's just been telling me, you know, count this all joy, babe. Everything, just count the darkness joy, because you're going to go into deeper aspects of me that I can't reveal to you in the light. Because you're too familiar with everything. So I'm going to pull you back into a little bit of a dark spot. And that's why you can count it joy, because you're in this dark spot and you're going, man, I'm going to see an aspect of the Father that I've never seen before, because I'm opening my eyes and I'm intending, so I won't stumble, so I won't trip over something. You see what I mean? And so I appreciate your teaching about that, because there's such beauty in the trials. And, you know, we all call trials, at least most of us do, darkness. Oh, I'm in a dark spot. I'm in a hard, you know, I'm in a hard spot. Oh my gosh. You know, but then you're going, no, I'm really in a pretty good spot here. This is a good thing, you know. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. There you go.
I love it. Yeah. All right.
I'll say real quick, the book is called Mr. God, This is Anna.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm going to let the worship team take over now.